The political landscape of North America was fundamentally recalibrated this week during a parliamentary session that likely marked the end of an era for traditional opposition tactics. As the United States and Canada remain locked in a historically unprecedented trade war, the Canadian House of Commons became the stage for a confrontation that shifted the gravity of Western political discourse. It was a clash between two fundamentally irreconcilable methodologies: the high-octane populist performance of Pierre Poilievre and the surgical, data-driven technocracy of Prime Minister Mark Carney. For those watching from Washington or London, the exchange served as a definitive test case for whether a liberal democracy can maintain its structural integrity when faced with the nationalist wave currently sweeping the globe. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre entered the chamber with a strategy engineered for the digital age. His approach followed a well-documented playbook: lead with overwhelming scale, frame economic indicators as a state of national emergency, and utilize the American comparison to imply a domestic failure. Poilievre's opening focused on a visceral depiction of a Canada in freefall. He cited household debt, framing it as the worst in the G7, housing costs, painting them as a suffocating crisis for the middle class, the Trump model, directing attention toward the United States' high-growth, high-deficit economy as the superior alternative. For the first 30 seconds, the performance was persuasive. It relied on the psychological trap of defensive derailment, the hope that the Prime Minister would respond emotionally, argue over minor footnotes, and ultimately appear rattled. In political theater, the moment an incumbent looks defensive, they have already lost the room. The primary miscalculation of the opposition was the assumption that Mark Carney, a man who spent 3 decades navigating the mechanics of global finance at the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, could be baited into an emotional retreat. Instead, Carney executed a re-anchoring of the debate. Rather than offering excuses, the Prime Minister utilized the native tongue of a central banker to dismantle the opposition's figures. He pivoted from vague pledges to measurable results that had materialized in a matter of weeks. The data is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of record. Asylum claims are down by a third. International student arrivals have been reduced by 60%. Temporary foreign worker permits are down 50%. Every instance of fraud is under active investigation. We are not promising a future. We are documenting a turnaround. The most sophisticated portion of the exchange occurred when the debate moved into the realm of GDP and fiscal sustainability. Poilievre's argument rested on the premise that the American model, defined by the $36 trillion national debt and aggressive deficit spending, was the benchmark for success. Carney's response was a surgical audit of the G7 balance sheet. He reminded the House that while the U.S. navigates a delicate tightrope between inflation and recession, Canada currently possesses 1. The lowest net debt in the G7, sitting at approximately 12.5%. 2. The lowest deficit in the G7, a fiscal anchor in a volatile global market. 3. The highest institutional credit rating, ensuring that sovereign wealth funds and international bond markets continue to view Canada as the most stable vault in the Western world. The intellectual credibility gap became visible in real time. By introducing these macro-level facts, Carney made Poilievre's economic disaster narrative structurally incompatible with the reality of Canada's balance sheet. Recognizing the collapse of his macroeconomic framing, Poilievre executed a tactical pivot toward emotional immediacy, what political strategists call the grocery aisle argument. He invoked the experience of a single mother struggling with food inflation and rising fuel costs. This move was designed to make Carney's fiscal metrics sound abstract and disconnected from human suffering. However, the Prime Minister met the emotional energy without mimicking the populist method. He anchored the response in purchasing power, real wage growth, highlighting that Canadian wages are currently growing at 4.2%, nearly double the rate of inflation, 2.2%. Rental market, citing that rents have hit a 33-month low, providing a rare window of relief in the housing sector. The job creation divergence. Perhaps the most devastating statistic of the day was the 6-month comparison. While the United States economy, an engine 11 times the size of Canada's, lost a net 6,000 jobs, Canada created over 80,000. A significant portion of the session was dedicated to the carbon tax narrative. Poilievre pointed to the 26-cent per liter gap between Canadian and American fuel prices, attributing it to what he called a renamed carbon tax, the Clean Fuel Standard. The Prime Minister's rebuttal was a lesson in regulatory clarity. He reminded the chamber that the consumer-facing carbon tax, the 18-cent per liter levy, that had been the center of political friction for 2 years, was already eliminated. By refusing to acknowledge this removal, the opposition was effectively attacking a policy that no longer existed. Furthermore, Carney clarified the distinction between a consumer tax and an industrial regulation. Clean Fuel Standard, This is a regulatory mechanism focusing on the carbon intensity of industrial production, not a purchase tax at the pump. U.S. Fuel prices. Carney noted that American prices are artificially suppressed by massive federal subsidies and the strategic depletion of the petroleum reserve ahead of election cycles. The attempt to relabel industrial standards as renamed taxes was exposed as a strategy to confuse rather than clarify, highlighting the difference between using economics as a weapon and using it as a native tongue. The final phase of the session moved from defense to the presentation of what is being called the Carney Doctrine. When Poilievre accused the government of delivering plans that don't fill the tank, Carney responded by listing the specific industrial frameworks currently undergoing multi-billion-dollar implementations. 1. Defense Industrial Strategy, labeled the most significant since 1945. 2. Clean Tech Framework, driving Canada to the number 2 spot globally for foreign direct investment, FDI. 3. The Auto and Battery Strategy, capturing nearly $95 billion in new capital investment. The session culminated in a 3-word invitation from the Prime Minister. Come join us. It was an invitation to participate in a project that was clearly intended to move forward regardless of opposition support. It was a display of confidence expressed without the standard political contempt, marking a rare moment of composure in a House of Commons typically defined by noise. The significance of this exchange extends far beyond the borders of Canada. It provides a blueprint for how a technocratic democracy can engage with populist methodology without surrendering its core principles. Poilievre's approach, selective data, emotional escalation, and the use of foreign models, is a methodology that has reshaped governments across the United States, the UK, and Europe. It succeeded in those regions because the political establishment often lacked a credible answer. They either retreated into jargon or attempted to mimic the populists' emotional frequency. In this session, the Prime Minister demonstrated a third path. He matched the energy of the attack, but maintained the integrity of the data. He proved that governing competence, when communicated with precision and calm, can dominate the room even in a media environment designed to reward distraction. Canada is currently serving as a real-time experiment. Can a liberal democracy forge a political identity strong enough to withstand the global nationalist wave? In 13 minutes of parliamentary debate, the evidence suggests that the native tongue of reality still possesses the power to outlast the performance of catastrophe. Strategic summary, balance sheet, advantage. Canada maintains the lowest net debt and deficit in the G7 as of April 2026. Job market resilience. Canada outperformed the US in job creation by a factor of 13 to 1 over the last 6 months on a per capita basis. Policy clarity. The removal of consumer carbon pricing and the focus on industrial clean fuel standards has stabilized domestic purchasing power while maintaining climate competitiveness. The most dangerous political moment is not when an opposition is loud, it is when a government forgets how to be clear. Today, the clarity belonged to the technocrat.